Anil, how are you? I am like so psyched to have you on the podcast. How you doing?
Nick, I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me. We've always listened to your podcast and your work over the years, so I'm excited to be here.
Oh, well, thank you so much. That's such a nice way to kind of start us off. So, Anil, I just got to meet you, a few months ago, and
Yeah,
so I'm not sure how many others in the community kind of know you, and so I want everyone to start to get to know you. So, can you start? Well, let's start with your kind of career path. First of all, obviously you're the CEO of Meter. And it's a company that's been, in operation for 10 years. It's one of the NaaS leaders in the marketplace. And you're one of the co-founders, and you're the CEO today. So let's back up a little bit. How did you kind of, what brought you, to like start companies up and get into the whole startup business?
sure. So, I think my main interest stemmed from the fact that I studied networking in college. I went to a school out in Northern Virginia where it was close to all the government work that was happening. So heavily networking, heavily infrastructure. So I ended up going to college when I was young, and really influenced by the work that was happening to make sure infrastructure is great everywhere. Um, and the problem we were trying to solve with Meter was an acute problem for ourselves about how do you actually get really great internet infrastructure in spaces. And our challenge was we were seeing this when we moved into a new office in our previous work. And I know networking, I've been around networking for a long time. I've helped build a lot of systems, and it was still hard, challenging, expensive, even for us. So the idea was always been pretty simple is how do you make it really easy for anybody to get internet, networking, Wi-Fi? And that idea germinated probably '07, '08.
Mm. Oh,
But by 2009, 2010, it was very clear how successful AWS was going to be. And I'm sure you remember, I certainly remember every time we wanted any computing power, we had to go rent out a space, buy a bunch of racks, servers, RAID, power, cooling, all of those things. And then AWS came along and said, hey, don't worry about doing all that.
mm,
We will figure that out. Just give us your applications. We'll help scale it. Just pay us
yeah.
for what you're going to use. So I think even AWS really pushed our thinking a bit on why is it that data centers got so much easier, but networking infrastructure still was hard to go do. So been roughly thinking about this for 15, 20 years now. And we started Meter about a decade ago.
Yeah. That's a great story, and it rings like so true. And there's like two major points, in there that I want to kind of double click on. One is networks have always been complex, and they continue to get more complex. And we continue to stack products on top of products and tools on top of tools, and so a simplification is like so needed in our industry. And I think what you guys are doing offers, a simplification strategy. And I think that's like really just so key and so important. And then the other part of this is it is the AWS model. So like we've had compute and storage, become really big, massive markets in SaaS models, and we're just starting that in networking. And networking always tends to lag other major trends, and there's multiple reasons, for that. So that's interesting. So that was like also you saw that, back in, God, 2007, 2008, it was like really when AWS kicked off. That's when the iPhone kind of kicked off. So we really had the birth of both cloud and mobile computing, then. So I guess it's like in those kind of formidable years of AWS and seeing that success, that was some of the motivation, that you had
Yeah.
to basically say, okay, why can't we do this for networking?
Yeah. And there's a bunch of things that you mentioned there that kind of hit upon it, right? First is the number of applications that are on networks is going up
Mm.
dramatically. And then as each application moves to the cloud, you know, the usage and the amount of bandwidth requirements, latency, others is more strain on a network.
Mm.
So every single type of space that might be an office, warehouse, life sciences lab, retail, healthcare, education now relies more on networking than it ever did. And particularly, the number of people that are studying this is going down, not up,
Yeah.
which is super interesting to think about,
Mm.
even though the strain on networks and even though the requirements and how much people notice if it's not working has really shot up.
Yeah.
If you go look at universities, and we track this here, the number of colleges now even offering networking degrees is just asymptoting,
Um,
which is really interesting because, as you can imagine, everybody has moved up the stack. Where if you're interested in computing, you're doing application development, then web development, and other things that go on top
yeah.
rather than the infrastructure down below. But the number of devices, number of clients on a network is going the other way on a graph,
Yeah.
really just increasing dramatically. And when you look at some of these challenges that are there, right, it's important to really think about is that simplicity should be in the delivery of the product. That doesn't mean the products and their capabilities should be simple. And
Mm.
I think that's the other thing a lot of folks that have started maybe new networking companies, sometimes we feel is a different approach than ours, which is the products tend to be simple
Mm.
as far as their capabilities go. But we don't believe in that approach at all. The
Mm.
delivery, all of those things should be simple, where I, as a really senior network engineer or a really big IT team, should be able to get a great product, but that should not stop me from having the complexity my customers demand, my environments demand, and really going across that. So there's a bunch of nuance there on how to think about simplicity and delivery and product as well.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. A whole bunch of trends, that you just alluded to, and you're right. There is the last time I heard some really reliable data was from, I think it was actually James Beeson, who was a CISO over at Cigna, and he was basically saying there's about 750,000 open recs for like security engineers and network, and the network engineering is pretty close to that, and that's on a worldwide
Right.
scale, and that's a massive number, and we're never going to close that gap. And I think our industry had a social compact that was um, you don't necessarily have to have a 4-year degree. You can be, if you're a network engineer, you can get training, you can get certifications, and you can have a really good middle class lifestyle. And that was a
Right.
super great deal. It's something that that I think we all should really be proud of in the industry. That we created like all these really great jobs. For folks that didn't need to do a 4-year degree. You know, but those are waning, and
Yeah.
so I think so. There's this demand for talent that isn't, and then the funnel isn't being fulfilled. So we know that that's a major problem. I think what I've also like heard too, and paradoxically, is that some folks who are network engineers and the network teams in large companies, some, not all, are concerned about NaaS being kind of a replacement for their jobs. I also
Yeah.
hear that there are others, like FedEx is a really good example. Is like they're really interested in NaaS because they have so many outposts. They can't staff up to do that. So it's like they want NaaS, kinds of services. And so I don't know. So where do you kind of see that? And I'm sure like you can't have one size fits all. Those scenarios are going to exist and they're going to coexist, in the
Yeah.
world. But
I think we fundamentally disagree that networking should replace network engineers. What we think about is building really great networking products for networking engineers.
mhm,
And I think we're successful if we're able to actually provide leverage to those,
mhm,
because they're asked to do a lot more than they used to be with a much smaller team.
yeah,
And because of that, we make them look good and help them with their customers, which is a lot of internal teams, in a lot of cases that you mentioned, might be in warehouses, might be in manufacturing, logistics. People are depending on the network because everything is just a packet
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
Mm.
So we actually think about it very differently. Even the way we build products, we hope to build beautiful products for networking engineers. And I don't mean beauty in just a pixel sense.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Mm.
Just how does it work? What's the flow? Does it match their workflows that they do? Is it simple to understand, yet there's powerful abstractions for them to be able to do it? So the thing that you were mentioning of some people being like fearful, I don't think they're wrong, because the things that others have been saying while we've been quiet are things that we disagree with.
That's
But
good.
we don't believe in that at all. We hope to build the best and most beautiful and complex and incredible abstractions for our customers, so that they don't have to worry about how things come together, but they should still have the incredible power to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
I think, again, if we harken back to the AWS example, right? You and I can now, right now on this call, spin up a server on EC2. We'll get great defaults, and we can put whatever applications we want on it. But if we decide to go SSH into that box and make any changes we want,
Yeah.
we can. And we can go to the AWS console, configure it any way we want.
Yeah.
But you still get great defaults.
Mm.
So engineering workflows, leverage, other things really matter, right? After AWS, did DevOps jobs really just go away? No, there was actually more work to do because
Yeah.
you're able to do a lot more now.
Yeah, well, I think like actually the DevOps movement was saved by cloud. You know,
Right.
that was
Exactly.
like, yeah, that's
Exactly.
for sure.
So that's what we hope to do for network engineers, is really build incredible, great products. And I don't mean this as a slight to everybody that came before us, but we just think the industry has been a bit stagnant. We don't think there have been beautiful products in the last decade, and we hope to contribute to that.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're standing on the shoulders of giants here and those that have pushed the world forward, but we think there can be like incredible products.
Yeah, I really when I buy in to that, I don't believe that. I think it's narrow thinking that that kind of a network service will displace, a job.
Yeah.
It's like there's this, and I think you kind of pegged it. It's like there is always so much like either reduction in force or reduction in budgets, that occur, and you're always asked to do a lot more. So I think the more that bandwidth, mental bandwidth, and capacity
Right.
that you can give a team, then I think the better that they'll do in delivering kind of the business value that they need to deliver. So I really think it's that concern is misplaced. Because I think even like, there was, even when cloud computing started, there was a lot of concern about, okay, it's going to
Absolutely.
displace, kind of IT jobs. And it did nothing of that. The only thing it did was increase that. And then even like,
Yeah.
so this will date me, and this might be a little bit before your time, but like when we transitioned the industry from like IBM's SNA to like DECnet and TCP/IP, and then there was the auto convergence, of networking, where it can fix and heal itself, without anyone doing anything. It was like magic, it was like that was
Right.
its Chat GPT moment, some like 30 years ago. And so people at the time thought, oh, okay, well, we're not going to need like anyone really managing the network because it's going to take care of itself. Yeah, right. It's like big boom and like, in networking, people and requirement for it. So, yeah,
Yeah, because for us, there's a very simple bet we're making here. And I think everybody that's probably listening and folks, I would assume they would agree with this, is that we will all use the internet more than we currently do.
Yeah.
And we feel like that's a very safe bet to make 2 years out, 5 years out, 10 years out, 20 years out,
Yeah.
for us to be building great products, because we will all just want more from it.
Yeah.
Even if you look at it from a per user basis and an aggregate basis, it's dramatically growing, dramatically.
Yeah.
And so I just see the world a bit differently, I think.
Yeah, no, that's great. Awesome. Okay, so I wanted to, I want to go back a little bit to the career journey. And
Sure.
was there like anyone or any? I know there was like an event, and that was kind of like the birth of kind of cloud computing. But was there anybody that that you saw in your early days, and that helped formulate, kind of like the career path that you chose? I guess basically any heroes or mentors.
I think so many, from Claude Shannon to McCullough and Pitts to all the way down.
Mm,
I tend to really believe in the history of it. And, there's other people like Pierre Lamond who are still working, who've been around since Fairchild to National to Cisco to now.
yeah,
And even the battle of, TCP/IP versus something else, the fact that it even works.
yeah,
And I think probably when I really formulated all of this is when I got to know Alan Kay's work. I think Alan Kay will probably go down as one of the greatest computer scientists and somebody who's contributed the most to the world in the next 50 years. I think he's super underrated now. And I think Kay's work is incredible. Licklider from ARPANET, all of those folks, what they did.
yeah,
Then obviously like Sutherland and Engelbart and all those folks. I think just understanding that this is actually magic, that this works.
yeah. I know.
The fact that you and I are having this call right now and we've all agreed on some protocols and it's going through this browser and the browser agreed on some things. And from here, it's going to the CPU and network card and back and all the way up to BGP. And then same thing on the other side. The folks that help dream this
Mm,
really thought about a lot of these things before.
yeah.
But I guess like if I had to pick, it'd be Shannon and Kay and Licklider and those folks.
Yeah, that's a great list. That's a really good list. It really just shows that how much you've studied. The history and the kind of the birth of like really packet networks and and computer networking. In particular, that's yeah. I'm really impressed. That's a great list.
I think it's just an incredible industry that we work in. I was alluding to this a little bit before, but the other fundamental thing that I've been thinking a lot about the last decade or two, my brother as well, who I started Meter with and I've been working with for a long time, is everything is just a packet. Everything. It might be
Mm,
groceries that we're ordering or an Uber to our kids watching YouTube or Twitch or whatever
yeah,
the case might be. And everything is just a packet and it's just driven by computing. It's just amazing. I find it really great. Some of the choices that were made. Imagine a world where TCP/IP did not win. Uh,
yeah.
what situation we'd be in today?
Well, I think we were like looking at OSI.
Yeah,
So I don't know, and hey, the right protocol won. I remember kind of in the middle of those battles, like back in the early 1990 time frame, and so I'm
right.
really glad that that IP won. It's like, and then once we had a standard, that just unleashed and a wave of innovation that I really haven't seen until really now, around as we kind of
Right.
move into the AI, as we are into the AI era, as well.
Yeah.
So, but I do want to talk to you about that. But before we kind of dive into that, let's talk a little bit about Meter itself. You've been around for 10 years. You're well funded. Maybe you could talk to like maybe some of the financial backers if you like. But also, it's like some of the products and services that you guys are delivering. And so, why don't we start with that? To make sure that people understand who
Sure.
Meter is.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think a lot of times the really difficult ideas are easy to say,
Mm,
but incredibly challenging to actually go do it.
mm,
For example, you brought up AI. Let's say the mission is we want to build AGI. Again, very easy to say in those 6 words,
mm,
but very hard to do over the course of decades. From the Dartmouth meeting to since 70 years ago to now. Or in our case, the idea germinated something very, very simply is that internet infrastructure is incredibly important It should be easy to get. It should have products that are great to work with and beautiful and can do complex environments easily. And this whole thing should be a utility.
Mm.
Now, what do I mean by utility? Utilities have a lot of connotations and how you think about it and all these different things. Today, if you look at a building, and I tend to look at the world entirely as an OSI model, somehow everything is an
Everybody
OSI
does.
model in my head.
Yeah.
And you look at electricity and water and telephone lines and other things. Let's pick like telephone and electricity, for example. It's hard for us to imagine those things as great technologies today, but
Mm.
100 years ago when they came out, absolutely they were technologies, and it blew people's minds, right?
Yeah.
And
Massively
anytime
disruptive technologies, and it created
yeah,
this amazing GDP boom that lasted for
incredible.
for decades. Yeah.
And anytime somebody asked for electricity or telephone line, literally a line was pulled to them,
Yeah.
literally.
Mm.
And if you looked at the sky in Manhattan in the early 1900s, you couldn't even see it.
Yeah.
And we have photos of these that we've collected internally.
Mm.
You couldn't see the sky.
Yeah.
Then people started saying, why am I going into a building that does not have electricity and telephone by default?
Mm.
And that was the pathway towards those becoming utilities. We feel the same way about internet infrastructure, that we find it incongruous that every time somebody moves into a space, they have to go through the rigmarole all over again,
Yeah.
every
Mm.
single time. So a building has electricity and water and telephone lines, there's power meters, water meters, etc. That's where even the name meter comes from.
Very good. Yeah.
And so today, what we do is, again, very simple to say, but hard to do. We make it really easy for network engineers and IT teams to get great internet networking, Wi-Fi in spaces that they are responsible for. What we ask of them is to give us an address, give us a floor plan, and answer some questions about what they're interconnecting to, what their security posture is, other things. Then we help deliver great networks
Mm.
for them. And it starts with ISP procurement. We built this product over the last 5 years called Connect. Think of it as Kayak or Expedia, but for ISPs,
Mm.
where our customers just say, here's my address. We will go fetch every single ISP. We're ISP agnostic. We work with everyone and show them the best ISPs, pricing, and a button to click to buy right there instead of having to do this for weeks.
Mm.
Then racks that we are proud of and our customers that are networking teams and IT teams would be proud of, that have our security appliances, our switches are delivered, and we install the access points that we build as well,
Mm.
and then give our customers this great platform across ISP, routing, security, switching, wireless, DNS security, VPN, SD-WAN, all in a single pane of glass,
Mm.
really great internet infrastructure at the click of a button for customers that are IT teams and networking teams,
Mm.
all as a service, entirely packaged together. And they don't have to go worry about the grunt work. They don't have to think about how are all these things going to come together. But fundamentally, what we also really care about is, again, building great products so they have even more access, even more configurability, and be able to do things otherwise either they were not able to do before or it was too complex to be able to do before.
Mm.
So end-to-end internet networking Wi-Fi for anyone is what Meter does.
Yeah, that's great. So it's both local area, kind of wireless, all the ISPs, kind of wide area networking, and then lifecycle management is managed by you guys, but they have control and access, through
That's right.
kind of a management interface. Yeah, that's great. And so,
Yeah.
and then both kind of like what they're calling, carpeted areas, which are kind of office buildings, manufacturing facilities as well. So it's like, so is the kind of user base, across those kind of dimensions?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think what's been interesting over the last 4 or 5 years is we've been quiet to the industry and folks like you, but
Hmm.
with customers, we're seeing tremendous amount of growth over the last few years. This is across warehouse, retail, education, life sciences labs, offices, high-rise buildings to really sprawling retail spaces and complex environments. We have customers in single floor of 500,000 square feet and up, and customers that have hundreds and hundreds of locations with us.
Mm.
So it really goes through the gamut. Again, this is for networking and IT teams. And as you know, it's hard to exactly determine all their environments, but we want to support really complex environments while still giving them incredible amount of control and access and visibility into their
Yeah.
systems.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah. You guys have been kind of like somewhat like a little quiet giant, in the industry. So, so happy, that obviously the folks who know you are the folks who really know you, and those are your customers. I'm just really happy to kind of like help you get your word out, and
No,
so that
thank you.
more people can, understand what you do, and they can broaden their options and their choices, for how they might be able to kind of attack, the kind of networking problems that they have. So I'm really happy to do this and have you on the program for sure. So
Yeah.
I want to. Do you want anything else? Do you want to like kind of dive down on to meter before we kind
Yeah,
of pivot
sure.
to
So
AI?
I think yeah. I think on Meter fundamentally, there's a few things we should chat about. I think you and I spoke about before when we met a couple months ago. Is there's a reason we've been deliberately quiet, right? We are talking about a very established industry
Hmm.
with good products that exist today for
Hmm.
customers. Now, what we don't believe is in just jumping in and making a lot of noise before we have great products
Hmm.
just to get a bunch of attention. And then when somebody tries to even use the product or demo it or actually try to understand what is this thing, it's like nobody understands what actually it is.
Hmm.
So what we've done is deliberately spent a decade building everything from the hardware to the operating systems to the backend distributed systems, APIs, dashboards, all of it. And the reason we're out coming now talking to folks is so that when we do come in to a marketplace that's a mature industry with good products, it should be evident to our customers and partners
Hmm.
that Meter is a great product
Yeah.
and they're contributing something to the industry. But the folks that you asked earlier on who our backers are and others and thinking like that too, you know, the folks we've been working with from the beginning are Sam Altman, who's one of our first investors,
Hmm.
Lockheed Groom, Sequoia Capital, who has a storied
Hmm.
history in networking,
Yeah.
everybody you can think of, to Diane Green, who helped start VMware,
Hmm.
um, Egon, who runs Silver Lake, David, who runs Goldman, Reid Hoffman, Lot Jay Parikh, who led engineering for Facebook, which became Open Compute.
Yeah.
I think what we try to do is build great products and bring in folks that know what great products are and that are very discerning in how they think about what products are out there and what's actually available and how is this differentiated but also additive to the industry in a sense that it really helps push the industry forward, and including people like Sanjit and John, who are now running Samsara, who used to run Meraki before,
Yeah.
Sanjay Jha, who ran Motorola and Qualcomm before. We've been fortunate enough to have all these folks in a group to really help think about what does networking look like for the coming decades.
Yeah, it's good. It's smart money. It's not like you didn't go to like some no name finances. So that's it's great. That's at that just they lend their brand to like your ideas. And to the brand of Meter. As well. So that's a great list. It's a great kind of intellectual brain trust that you have access to. So that's great, Anil. So let's start talking a little bit about AI. So you have what is it's called the switch matrix. So I'm kind of assuming your AI, where you're kind of getting value from AI, is really in the lifecycle management. That the part that makes things simpler for consumers to manage. So, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. So, is there an AI play with Meter?
So I think and everybody at Meter always is careful by using buzzwords.
Yeah.
We try to understand and start with what is the customer problem that's being solved, and let's work backwards from there. So I think, a lot of folks, and it's very easy these days to just say, we have AI and this is what it does, and this is how it's changing the industry and all those things. But AI is not just a direct impact. It's important to think about what it enables from customer benefit perspective. Now, as you can imagine, with the people that are involved with Meter and the architecture that we built, which is what we think we are really contributing to the industry, is a brand new architecture and how packets are processed, to how all of our hardware down to the port level is all virtualized as a digital twin in the back end. And then once you have incredible architecture, incredible systems in the back end, and data that powers it in real time, there's a lot of applications to be able to do on top, including, I think, AI as well. So, we don't have anything to announce today per se, but it is something that we've been working on for a long time. And it's part of technologies that we think about using, again, to enable what problems we're solving for the enterprise and improving the customer experience. But we are very careful of not just tacking something on just for the sake of it and just calling it AI.
Yeah, that's smart because it's if it's really wafer thin, that's that's kind of your story is like really quick and it's just dismissed. So like this smart, it's
Yeah.
so then let's talk about kind of one idea is that so how does the kind of the Meter infrastructure kind of look like, right? So you have thousands of companies, and they all have either slices or they have their own infrastructure that Meter is providing. So how does that look, and how do you provide that separation between all your various different customers, and you still leverage a shared infrastructure?
Yeah. So the shared infrastructure is only on the back end where we have
Yeah.
the management plane. Data planes are entirely separate. We don't touch data planes, nor do each of the customers. Now, our infrastructure is, again, starts with ISPs, but then our security appliances, then our switches, and then wireless. And then on top of that are applications that are SD-WAN, DNS security, VPN, all of those to be able to do it. But the real power of the platform comes in is because the whole thing is integrated end to end.
Mm.
And customers don't have to go think about, oh, are all these things going to work together? Am I going to have 5 different dashboards that are open? Is the data, sanctity maintained between each of these? If I'm trying to understand what's going on with the client, or if I'm trying to put in a rule because of compliance and security needs that have changed for my business, do I have to go do it in many different places? Then I'm trying to understand analytics and metrics and understand what's going on with my infrastructure across hundreds of locations.
Mm.
Today, that's a challenge
Yeah.
across platforms. That's a challenge across how they work together. And then customers have to go buy other products that are overlays on top of all of this
Yeah.
to then understand their infrastructure. We think it should be really integrated infrastructure that can give that view of end to end for a networking team, for an IT team.
Yeah. That's awesome. So there's no commingling of data. So they're kind of separate data planes for everyone. The control planes, also they're virtualized, and so they're separated for every particular company. So obviously, the policies that one company puts in is totally separated from policies that
Yes.
another company actually puts in as well. So really, you do have your own separate network. And so that's
Yeah.
actually that's a beautiful model. So you guys will come in, you'll place a rack. First of all, you'll do like a bunch of analysis around, okay, how big the building is, how many people now need to be supported, what's the square footage of the buildings, how many buildings there are, requirements. I would think application load and so forth, and then you customize racks. You drop the racks in, you do the configuration, build the network, and then hand the keys over.
Yeah.
Don't want to make it
No,
too
that's a
simple,
really
but
good description. No, that's a really good description. It starts with ISP. We go do the network design, site surveys, build out the racks, and then hardware that we built, security appliances, switches, APs, etc., are installed. Then security and compliance. Then Meter also does upgrades at zero cost as part of our service so
mm,
that customers are always on the best infrastructure. And then it's co-management or full management by us, but we really, I think, now have built products that make management incredibly great for our customers without taking away any control and power for them. So
mm,
that full life cycle of when network design, site surveys, hardware installation and testing, security upgrades and management, that's, you're right, that's the full circle.
yeah, that's great. Awesome, I know. So let's fast forward, a few years, and so there's so many drivers that are causing change and disruption in the industry. But if we kind of just focus on networking, where do you think, do you have a vision of where you think this industry and this market is going to go over the next few years?
Yeah, I think there's like two different things that are happening in the short to medium term. And then I believe some sort of conversions for some things will happen in the medium to long term. So in the short to medium term, there's two different paths for data center networking and local networking.
Mm-hmm.
And data center networking is on a different path right now because of some of the applications and workloads that have suddenly shot up in the last 2.5 years,
Mm.
thanks to AI and other things. What's interesting is because of that, primarily, not that many people are focused on local networking.
Yeah,
Everybody's really thinking about data center a lot
that's very
from
true. Yeah.
resourcing perspective, from investment perspective, where their team spend their time, where their marketing dollars go, to where their support goes. So putting those two things as separate, looking at local networking, I think the amount of workloads will go up a lot and the number of clients and devices is going to really go up.
Mm.
But I still think there's going to be a talent crunch. So the folks that are in the industry that have that skill set and knowledge, I think they'll become more valuable.
Mm.
But they're going to also start really demanding great products because of how much more their networks have to do
Mm.
and how much more work they have to do. Now, that's in the short to medium term, let's say the next 5 to 6 years. I do anticipate 5 to 10 years from now that data center networking and local networking will have to come together again if some of these applications are successful,
Mm.
where the last mile will be the biggest challenge
Mm.
entirely,
Yeah, always is.
both on delivery, management, and what's available.
Mm.
And how does this scale? As you want inference and applications to go to the edge for speed and latency and personalization,
Yeah.
the requirements will just really shoot up a
Mm.
lot.
Yeah.
And so thinking about where that goes, we think like short to medium term, it's incredible to us. Not that many people care about local networking anymore.
Yeah.
And when we build good products and show it to customers, they're blown away and they're just like, why is nobody else working on this? And we're like, everybody's kind of has their eye on something else.
Yeah.
But we do anticipate, because of those data center needs going up, things will have to converge 5 to 10 years from now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, and you're absolutely right. But it's been a while that we haven't focused on kind of campus and local area networking.
Yeah.
And I think there's a goodness from that I think Meter is able to take advantage of, and that is that we kind of have the design patterns. We know how to do that. We know, what the kind of delivery, the quality of service that is required in campuses and in kind of local area networks. Obviously, we had the pandemic and remote workforce, over the last couple of years too, and that probably is another contributor, towards the you know I guess, lack of focus on local area networking. But I think it's like all of those. So having a really good understanding of what's needed, then that can be modeled as you guys have done, so that that can become a service now. And so, okay, it's one less thing that the network team needs to worry about. And then you're right. I think in the long term, you know, it's really going to be, it's a tough, it's tough to kind of get at that vision, because I think we've had kind of the design pattern in the data center for, a good 15 years or so. And that's kind of like we went from a 3-tier into a 2-tier. But now it really depends on how much AI impacts the infrastructure within data centers. Do we all,
Yeah.
like so many companies and people are looking at the NVIDIA design pattern, kind of you have the fabric and you have the GPUs and you have, the PCI bus and
Yeah.
RDNA and then up into the network. So does that replace kind of the design pattern that we've had before? And if it does, then okay, well then also it's that how much of this obviously it needs to be networked, so those requirements in networking will change too. So yeah, I don't have a really good crystal ball on that, that more longer term, vision, because
Right.
it's still not clear to me. Are we going to see a radical shift, on how we're designing data centers, or are we just going to really take the design patterns that we have today and scale them up and also scale them out, so.
Yeah. We don't anticipate anything will stay the same actually from how ASICs are designed to
Mm,
how, particularly networking, data center and local, to ASICs, to chips, to how those things come together. How do you do packet processing? How do you do new types of networking? Then how do you actually mutate those packets to how it's accessed? And then how do you give great applications to the end customers, again, that are IT and networking engineers?
mm,
We've been building towards this for years, as you can imagine. If some of these folks are our earliest investors and been around for a long time,
mm,
we think there's something great to be built here, and it can be very additive to the industry and what teams can do and network engineers can do. But I do anticipate there will be a full change of everything, because you have to think about where the bottlenecks are, right? So there's going to be bottlenecks first to start on management,
mm,
which is what we hope with some of the products that we've been building for years. And again, we've been quiet in classic meter style about them, but we'll talk about them soon.
mm,
Then there's bottlenecks in processing. Then there's bottlenecks in architecture. Then there's bottlenecks in hardware. Then there's bottlenecks in the actual underlying ASICs.
mm.
So I think we'll see a straight flow down over the next decade, decade and a half, if it turns out that the usage will be as much we all are anticipating, or some folks are kind of proselytizing them to be.
Yeah. Well, I know. I think that's a great place to kind of stop.
Yeah.
I think we kind of gave everybody, I think, a good understanding who you are, and that was one of the major goals of today, and then also Meter, and to end on a vision for how the industry is going to progress, in the next few years. Really happy to have you guys part of the community at the AI Networking Summit, being hosted by ONU. So pleased to have you there. And so if you all want to meet Anil, come on over to Dallas, May 15th and the 16th. Anil, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
that's right. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for plugging in.